What is up, and welcome to episode 8 of the Bruin Bible. We officially have UCLA football coming this weekend, August 28th. I am so lucky to be joined by LA Football Network's very own Jamal Madni. Jamal, you're in Denver, Colorado right now, is that correct?
Yes, I am, and excited to be here with you, Will, and talk about the Bruins. Thanks so much for having me.
We are stoked to have you, man. And you wrote a fantastic article this past week on the state of the Bruins program and how it's really kind of stumbled since the Terry Donahue era. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about the upcoming season as a whole. We got a game against Hawaii this weekend, a lot to be excited about. Maybe some predictions there, and maybe an over-under win total for the Dorian Thompson-Robinson / Chip Kelly-led Bruins this year. But let's go to your article first. Great piece. I recommend anyone listening to this to go to the network's website and check it out. Jamal is a really talented writer that we're going to have on the show as much as he would like to come on. Jamal, kind of give me the background on what has gone wrong since Donahue retired in the late 90s.
You know, Will, it's really interesting. When you think about UCLA football, it really feels like a hidden gem program, both nationally as well as on the West Coast. When you look at kind of the key ingredients of what they have, a national brand, a historic brand of athletic success. You talk about the academics, you talk about the campus, you talk about the national exposure, name recognition, the co-eds. You know, it really doesn't make a lot of sense at first glance as to why UCLA football has struggled the way it has in the past 20 plus years. And I think part of it has been a correlation with the influx of just money in professional sports and professional football in particular. And that's kind of forced athletic programs to really have hyper-focused strategies of whether or not they're a football first school or they're a basketball first school. And I think UCLA has taken the approach of, hey, we want to be kind of an all-around athletic department. But I think they've kind of realized that they need to double down a little bit more in terms of football resources. And I think there's been a turning of the corner, with the hiring of Chip Kelly and kind of paying him top dollar as opposed to Rick Neuheisel and the Durrell years and so forth. And I think the second big piece was having the new Wasserman Football Center on campus and really kind of having state-of-the-art facilities. And that's kind of a signal to recruits, to parents, to, you know, assistant coaches that, hey, UCLA is going to be more serious about football moving forward. So hopefully there's a turning of the corner with that.
Hopefully there's a turning of the corner is right. And Jamal, I just want to shout you out for a quick second. When you said they were sponsored by Jordan Brand, the greatest athlete in team sports history, I'm a Jordan guy. I love LeBron. He's fantastic. He's a fun player to watch. But Michael will always be the GOAT for me. So I'm happy you shouted that out like that. But also you brought up some valid points. I mean, when you look at the football complex, where these guys are trained the offseason, I mean, the famous Brady video where he's throwing it into the jug machine, that's at UCLA. You know, Russell Wilson's there. Odell Beckham's there. You know, the cream of the crop NFL talent is now flocking to Westwood to train during the summers. To have a center like that, it's priceless. And when you get a guy like Chip Kelly, who has had so much national success, I mean, when he's running that Oregon offense, you know, close to a decade ago, that was as good as an offense as you'll ever see in the Pac-12, probably since the Bush Liner teams at USC. So to get a guy like that on campus is huge. Granted, he has not even come close to coming up with those expectations since he's been there. But it's kind of a now or never situation. We've talked all offseason long about how this team has the talent to, you know, win 8 or 9 games coming into this year. All 5 offensive linemen return. You have a 4-year starter in Dorian Thompson-Robinson. You got a great backfield, Britton Brown and Zach Charbonnet, the transfer from Michigan there. Greg Dulcich, I don't know if you watch these Herbie Awards, Kirk Herbstreit named, you know, maybe the top 3 players that are being undervalued around the country. Dulcich was his number 1 choice on that, the tight end from UCLA. Sure. And if you go and watch the USC film, I mean, he's probably the best player on the field that night. He was outstanding as a tight end for UCLA in the pass game. The offense is going to be there for the Bruins. I don't think they have anything to worry about that. But kind of give me your assessment on how good this team could be on offense, because I think the sky is the limit. Chip Kelly's kind of got his pieces where he wants them, and he's now going to go let them play.
Well, I think you nailed it on the head. And if you really look at this season, last season in many ways was obviously an anomaly with COVID, and everyone talks about the importance of year three for a new coaching regime, and this is really Chip's year three, in many ways in terms of his full season, where he's got his guys and he's got his philosophy in place. And it's so interesting that you mentioned those great Oregon teams, and he's very much got this team in that impression and in that mold. Those great Oregon teams, whether it was Darren Thomas or Marcus Mariota, they had the two-headed monster with LaMichael James and Kenyon Barner, and then they had a great tight end in Ed Dixon. And so when you talk about DTR, when you talk about the Charbonnet-Britton Brown combo, and then you talk about Dulcich, that's the exact same formula that he had at Oregon. Many people, fail to sort of realize that even when he was putting up half 100 year after year at Oregon, it really wasn't through the wide receiver. Oregon didn't really have a five-star blue chip kind of NFL guy at wide receiver. And it's sort of funny to think about when they were lighting up the scoreboard. It was really sort of run first, run with the quarterback, and then get the tight end involved with the RPOs. And that's what he's got going here with exactly those pieces. And so that combined with the experience, the key for me offensively is going to be how can DTR manage the inevitable bad play. And I think what has sort of happened with DTR in the first 3 years of his career is one bad play becomes two, becomes five, and all of a sudden a good game can get derailed. So how can he kind of stay on schedule and kind of shake off a bad throw, shake off a bad read, and just continue to stick with the process? He's got so much talent that I think for him, it's a matter of being able to read the game of when do I need to be game manager and when do I really need to let my athleticism speak for itself. And I think hopefully the continuity with the offense is going to get him to realize that year four starter, such a rarity in college football. I think he's really ready to make that next leap.
I think you're totally spot on. It was always a question more of, boy, if this guy figures it out at the QB position, the rest of the Pac-12 is going to be in trouble because this guy, like you said, has all the talent in the world. And we've seen little steps, incremental improvements year after year. For instance, last year was the first year he completed over 60% of his passes. We saw him be a little bit more dynamic in the run game. The play that stands out in my mind is that long touchdown run he had against Colorado in the first few weeks of the season. I think it was like a 60-yard QB choice to the outside. Beautiful play. And we lost 4 games last year by a combined 15 points. So we were in these games. I mean, for any Bruins fan, the UCLA SC game was probably maddening because they had the lead. They get a kickoff return back to like the 50-yard line, and then USC kicks a game-winning field goal to win it. So it's just frustrating. And most of the losses went that way. Kind of give me some stat expectations for where you think Dorian Thompson-Robinson could be at the end of the year. And do you think there's a chance he could be first-team All-Pac-12 when all is said and done at the quarterback position?
Well, I think for DTR, I think the next step in his progression is, I think, completion percentage. I think he's going to be in that 62, 63% in kind of the completion percentage game. I think Chip is going to really sort of protect him a little bit in terms of some of the lateral passes, some of those easier throws, some of those shorter balls to Dulcich and Kyle Phillips. I think certainly 3,000 plus yards is in the cards. And I think he's going to challenge for a year of 25 touchdowns or more. I think that's kind of where he's sitting. I think the key for me is going to be, is that interception number under 10? Because, I think he's going to get the numbers. The question is going to be, how can he sort of limit those mistakes? And, you mentioned obviously the 4 losses. When you look at the USC game, that was a game that UCLA really dominated for 2.5 to 3 quarters. There was a couple of mistakes there on some short yardage situations that really sort of snowballed. Then there was sort of that pick that he had with Hufanga, down the sideline. And then when you look at kind of the Stanford game, I mean, they sort of had that game locked up. And again, it was kind of a short yardage mistake that sort of opened the door for Stanford to go down and force overtime and ultimately go into double overtime. So for me, the key for DTR is going to be limiting those mistakes. And I think if he's at 10 or under interceptions, I think that's going to be a real recipe for success for UCLA. along with a completion percentage up north of 63%.
I think those are all great predictions, and we're going to have to check these out at the end of the year because we want to go back and check them out for our own 2 cents. The one thing is we've mentioned the Chip Kelly run game was dominant, and returning 5 linemen, including Sean Ryan, who, may be the class of the Pac-12 when it comes to left tackles out there. Alec Anderson is a future pro at right tackle as well. So you have the bookend tackles there. You have the 2 running backs we talked about earlier. We got DTR who's going to take some balls himself and just scramble down the field. Give me your opinion. When the season concludes, do you think this can be a team that has a top 10 rushing offense in the entire nation? Because I actually do. When you have a coach like Chip Kelly and you have all those pieces coming back, I think just in general, if you have a good offensive line at the pro level, high school, college, whatever it may be, you're going to have a chance to be in some football games. I think the line is one of the strengths of this team.
I think that's a great point. I think top 10 would certainly be something very aspirational for them to get to, but certainly within the realm of possibility, no question about it. I think, they'll certainly be in the top 20, I would say. And I think for me, more than personnel, I think the personnel is there at the QB position, the running back position, the O-line. To me, it's more about tempo. And I think where UCLA got in a little bit of trouble last year, truthfully, was Chip had his foot on the gas every step of the way on every play. And I think while that worked at Oregon, I think Chip has to sort of incorporate a little bit more of Sean McVay in his sort of packages when you're talking about the UCLA run game. I think sometimes UCLA sort of outran themselves, outran holes and blocks and spacing opportunities, especially in key short yardage situations, if you look back. And I think his hurry up tempo sometimes was very detrimental from a game management standpoint. So I think schematically spot on that they have all the makings to have a great season. I think the key between a top 20 rushing season and a top 10 is actually going to be the way Chip manages tempo.
I love it, man. And it'd be nice to see some motion wide receivers coming across the field as McVay loves to use. Britton Brown, this guy averaged almost 7 yards a carry last year. This is a very good veteran back to have. And you had Charbonnet from Michigan, who, was the cowbell ball carrier for Michigan his freshman year on campus. 5-star recruit coming out of Oaks Christian down there in the Los Angeles area. Kind of fell out of favor with Josh Gaddis as he was more kind of speed and space type of guy. Charbonnet's more of a bruiser for his size, I'd say. But, I talked to Mike Regalado, who's the 24/7 sports guy for UCLA and the Bruin Report. And he told me Charbonnet looked as good as advertised in spring ball. What do you make of these 2 backs?
It's interesting, Will, when Demetric Felton, who, had such a sensational year last year as UCLA's primary back, when he decided to not play the Stanford game for, getting ready for the NFL, and we put Brown in there, we didn't miss a beat at all. I mean, Brown was north of 170 in that game, was hitting his holes. He's a smooth runner. He reminds me a little bit of Chris Marquis, with a little bit more sort of wiggle to his game. And Charbonnet is definitely sort of a bruiser, no question about it. He likes that contact. I think that's why he picked Michigan and wanted more of that Big Ten style. But he is deceptively fast. He's got a motor on him, and the legs, they move quickly. He's got very quick feet. And so, I think he's got a little bit of Le'Veon Bell to him, a little bit, to be honest with you, in terms of that quick feet in the hole. And I think UCLA fans are going to see a little bit of that from Charbonnet. He's sort of deceptively fast. He's going to surprise some folks down the sideline as well. And so very bullish on both those guys. And that's going to be the bread and butter of this UCLA team.
Couldn't agree more. I think the offense, if Dorian Thompson-Robinson could be as good as we think he can be this year, I don't think it's going to be a lot of many problems coming from the O. The defense is the question. You do have a little bit of improvement with Jerry Azzanero's squad on the defensive side of the ball. Caleb Johnson had 5.5 sacks in 7 or 8 games last year. Very impressive stuff from him. Agude showed some flashes. Quentin Lake's going to be healthy this year. Hopefully he can play more than 5 games. He's only done that once in his career. Love what I'm seeing from Quantrez Knight. Just a lot of starters returning on defense. But we did see that at least a tangible improvement from Mazzanero last year. I think if they can get in the top, 50 to 60 defenses with how good that offense can be, I don't think it'll be that problematic. Do you think that's a fair statement?
Well, absolutely. And again, I think once again, the defense is sort of modeling a little bit of Chip's persona defensively. He's always historically loved a little bit more undersized guys at the D-line position, but who are quicker. And his sort of physical enforcers have always been on the back end in the secondary. And when you look at Quantrez Knight and when you look at Quentin Lake and you look at Kirkwood, those guys love to get after it. And those guys are physical guys, both in terms of press coverage as well as sort of back in when they're in different coverages in dime and in nickel and so forth. And so I think it's going to be really exciting to see them on the back end. The one challenge with those guys is they take a lot of chances back in the secondary. And so part of the challenge with this defense is that they're very big play prone to sort of giving up the big play. And I think if they can kind of stay disciplined and really the goal, I think, for the defense is number of plays. And I think the more plays in sort of a weird sense, the more plays they can be on the field, I think it's going to be better for UCLA because they're not giving up the big plays on the back end. And I think hopefully this year, I think it's going to be a little bit more of a simplified model. I think there was a lot going on schematically the last couple of years, a lot of confusion you could see in different spaces. And I think a streamlined, simplified approach to just sort of attack the defenses in certain areas, I think is going to be really key. And let your players be physical, but not be reckless.
Last question I'll touch on for the defense. Do you think this team does achieve its ceiling of being, in the 50s and 60s on defensive numbers?
I think so. And I think that's going to be a product of both, I think, their simplified playbook. And I think it's also going to be a little bit of a product of you've seen quite a bit of turnover in the Pac-12 on the offensive side of the ball and a lot of question marks at quarterback. And I think that's going to sort of help this group a little bit and maybe even camouflage some of the challenges that they may have because even though the schedule is very difficult, when you go sort of on a quarterback by quarterback basis, there's still a lot of questions with some of the teams that they're playing. And so I think kind of mid-60s is probably where this team is going to end up defensively.
I love it. Well, we do have a game this weekend, Hawaii traveling to the Rose Bowl in Los Angeles to take on your UCLA Bruins. Just good to have football back in general, Jamal. It's going to be a nice time out there. This is a game that the Bruins can't take lightly because they got LSU the following week. And, this is a team that has not won an out-of-conference game with Chip Kelly as their coach, which is a crazy stat to even throw out there. This is a familiar foe to Chip Kelly. Todd Graham, the head coach of Hawaii, coached at Arizona State for many years while Chip Kelly was dominating the Pac-12 North with Oregon. So they do know each other pretty well. There's a lot of talent there, too. I mean, 18 starters returning for the Rainbow Warriors. This is not a team you can take lightly. They've got a quarterback who's, relatively dual threat, Chavin Cordero. He threw for over 2,000 yards last year, 14 touchdowns, ran for 7 and close to 500 yards on the ground. This is a team that the Bruins are going to have to come out and smack in the mouth early. But I do think this is a very winnable game. What are your thoughts on the opening game for UCLA on Saturday?
Well, absolutely. I think this is a really good first game for UCLA. I think that, Hawaii comes in with, again, a lot of experience and a lot of juice. And I think one of the things that's kind of been a challenge for UCLA in the recent past, kind of the Fresno States, the San Diego States, you got a lot of teams who come in rather experienced. They've got this game circled. It's a lot of players that maybe got passed by UCLA in recruiting. It's a lot of guys who are relatively close from a geographic standpoint, who are kind of either coming back home or near home, and they've got a chip on their shoulder. And UCLA has sort of struggled a little bit to put teams away early. And then, things sort of snowball when you kind of get into the second half of games and it's a close game. And then you give your team, an underdog a lot of confidence moving forward. And then, the shorter the game gets, the more challenging it can be in terms of precision and execution. for UCLA. So I think that this is going to be a competitive game for a half to 2.5 quarters. And then I think you're going to see UCLA pull away and win by, 2 touchdowns, 14 to 17 points. But I think you're going to have a competitive first half of a game. I think UCLA is still going to be kind of finding themselves exactly what they want to do. Hawaii's going to come in charged up. And I think Graham knows Chip Style very well. He won a Pac-12 South title at Arizona State, gave Oregon fits while he was there. And so I think he knows kind of what to expect, but I think the talent discrepancy will ultimately take over in the second half.
Awesome. Well, I got some quick over-unders for you before we go down the conference schedule for UCLA, see if we got any winners, just some predictions there. Over-under, Dorian Thompson-Robinson throws for over 200 yards on Saturday.
Over.
Love it. He's going to rush for over 70 yards, over or under.
I'm going to go under there, Will. I think Charbonnet and Brown are going to do the lion's share.
Well, you knew me too well. I'm going with those guys. The next question. One of those guys, in my opinion, is going to get over 100 yards. You can go either over under for Charbonnet or Brown for over 100 yards. Are you going with the veteran in Brown or the youngster Charbonnet?
I'm gonna go with Brown for the first game, and I think that given that he's the more experienced guy, I think he's going to get some more touches to start. But I think Charbonnet is definitely going to make his mark on this game.
Last one I got for you, Greg Dulcich. We're going to go 80 yards, but here's a caveat and a touchdown. So I guess over under a half touchdown plus 80 yards in the receiving game.
That's an interesting one. I think I'm going to go under on that. I think the team's going to get into the red zone quite a bit, and then it's going to be maybe a keeper or two into the end zone for DTR, or given to one of the backs to sort of bring it in. So I think I'm going to go under on the half touchdown with Dulcich.
I love it. Well, by the way, what was your final score? You have them winning by 2 touchdowns. I'll share mine after I get yours.
So I got them in kind of the 14 to 17 range there. I kind of like them 37-17 on Saturday.
I love that. I went 42-20. I went the run game is going to be dominant, and we're going to get some Greg Dulcich touchdowns. That was kind of my prediction for the game. So not too far off between the two of us, man. Here is the schedule for the season for the Bruins. I'm just going to read off the scheduled games, and you're just going to go win or loss, and we'll tally them up when all is said and done. We just picked Hawaii, so the next game is LSU. I mean, this one is going to be a tougher one at the Rose Bowl. Ed Orgeron coming back to LA for a big-time game. I mean, even the most optimistic Bruins fans, I don't know if they think they could beat a team that won a national championship just 2 years ago. Are you taking a loss here? Maybe you're surprised W.
Well, I have high hopes for the season, but they're going to be hitting up above their weight talent-wise in this game. And even though LSU is going to be breaking in a new quarterback, it's Brad Johnson's son is the new quarterback at LSU, the Southpaw. He had a great performance last year in the swamp in Florida. They won 37-34 on the last second field goal. And teams historically, no matter how good they are, they always struggle a little bit early season on the road, breaking in a new quarterback. But having said all of that, I have a hard time believing UCLA is going to pull that one out. I think that's going to be an L.
And remember, you seem similar to my age. When we were growing up, Miami was that school where it's like, man, how much NFL talent comes from Miami. LSU is kind of that new school. You can really draw up a whole professional football team just based off of LSU players. Joe Burrow, Odell Beckham, Jarvis Landry, Jeremy Hill at the running back. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. Whitworth at tackle. It just is insane what they have available at their disposal down there in the Bayou. We're going to take it to Fresno State the next game. We have lost to them in the Chip Kelly era before, but I think this is a new team that's capable of beating them. I think this is a W here. What do you think, Jamal?
Agreed. I think this is going to be kind of it's going to be kind of combination of revenge and recover. I think it's going to be revenge for the last couple of times that UCLA has played Fresno State, and then it's going to be a bit of a recovery game after LSU, and they're going to head into conference season 2-1.
Awesome. I love that. And you said it, man. They're going to conference season. Lost a heartbreaker to Stanford last year. They're going to be up at the farm here in Palo Alto. I'm up in the Bay Area as we speak right now, so this will be a game I'll be attending in person. Do they get revenge on Stanford?
I think they do. I think this is the game, truthfully. I think this is the game where I think fans, this is a must win in many ways for UCLA, because I think the expectation is sort of 2-1 out of non-conference. It's kind of clean cut in that regard. I think Stanford is breaking in a lot of new players as well. David Shaw is still trying to kind of find his identity here post, not having Harbaugh's players and kind of the post McCaffrey era. This is definitely going to be a win for UCLA.
I couldn't agree more. It's so weird to see a David Shaw team without a defense. Those staple teams with those Blake Martinez linebacker-led squad, Shane Scove, players like that. The run defense last year was atrocious, and it doesn't look like it's going to get much better. Love David Shaw as a coach, but if this UCLA team's as good as we think it is, I think that is a victory, and they do keep the hype alive. Here's a game. This will be the 5th game of the season where I will be glued to my couch watching no matter what happens. This is Dorian Thompson-Robinson taking on Jaden Daniels of Arizona State in the Rose Bowl. Hopefully I can get a media pass for this game. But, this is a game where you see these two type of guys. I remember college football a couple of years ago. They had Deshaun Watson against Lamar Jackson, like two very exciting quarterbacks. That's almost the Pac-12 equivalent of this game. Tough squad. These are two very evenly matched squads, in my opinion. Who are you rolling with in this game?
Well, this is one of the two games on the schedule that I think, can break either way. And I think this is one of those two games where the outcome in many ways is going to determine whether or not the perception of the season is going to be successful or not. And I think you nailed it on the head with the Daniels DTR matchup, almost in many ways kind of the blue chip QB matchup. No disrespect to Keaton Slovis, but athlete-wise, these are the two guys that I think are the most electric at the quarterback position in the conference. Daniels had an incredible season 2 years ago, coming on the scene as a freshman, beat Oregon. There were some big wins there. Then obviously last year they had SC beat and just couldn't kind of close the deal. And then obviously with COVID, they didn't play a game until 3 weeks later and just never seemed to kind of get into rhythm. I think that they have all the pieces, but Arizona State historically struggles a little bit on the road, especially in the Herm Edwards era. And I think Antonio Pierce has done an outstanding job defensively as well with Herm. I think they've really, and Marvin Lewis, they've brought this sort of pro-style approach, modeling a lot of those great Tampa 2 defenses with the Gruden days, with the Bucks. They're really sort of modeling their team as sort of a pro-style team of that ilk. But I think there's still some inconsistency on the offensive side of the ball. We're not really sure who Daniels' favorite target is going to be this year. And he's a guy who likes his favorite receiver, and he likes to go to him in pressure situations. And I think it's still going to be early in the season. Having said all of that, I think at home, Rose Bowl, this is a game I like UCLA to eke out.
I agree with you. I think this is going to be a very fun game to watch. I do think if UCLA can reach their ceiling this year, this is a game they have to win. And, if they want to be competing for that Pac-12 championship in the South, they have the talent to line up with an Arizona State squad and, beat them in a big-time game. A guy to watch out for on ASU, though, Rachaad White, the running back there. He averaged an astounding – I thought this was literally like a typo when I saw it. 10 yards a carry last year. 10 yards. That is a first down every time he touched the ball on 42 carries. So, that's pretty damn impressive from Rachaad White. Gotta love Herm Edwards. He's such a good disciplinary coach. His teams don't make dumb penalties. They're smart. They're coached up as they are. But I think with the run game for UCLA, I think they're going to chew out the clock at the end of the game and get a victory. They're going to go down and play in Tucson following the game at the Rose Bowl. University of Arizona, not a whole lot to talk about the Wildcats this year. Jed Fish, former quarterbacks and offensive coordinator coach for the Bruins. A lot of love for Jed, but I just don't think it's in the cards for his first year at University of Arizona. I got them winning big. Add anything if you want. I think this is an easy victory.
Will, totally agree. I think it's ground up for Jed this year. The one thing I'll say is it's sort of surprising how disappointing the Kevin Sumlin tenure was. When you think about his ability to recruit, kind of the system that he had in place, and the relative proximity of Tucson to a college station, and having kind of being in that similar region. He had so much success at Texas A&M. Obviously, that's different resources. It's an SEC school, but the fact that he couldn't get enough kind of spillover there was really surprising. And so, Jed's got a heck of a task in front of him, but this is definitely full-on rebuild year for Arizona. This should be Bruins big.
I agree with that. This now follows the toughest stretch of the season for UCLA. They play Washington, Oregon, and Utah in 3 consecutive weeks, which are 3 very tough teams, breaking it down. Where do you have them kind of going in this 3-game span? If they can go 2-1 in this span and, beat the likes of, Arizona State, like we talked about, and, continue to win their out-of-conference games and beat a Stanford, 2-1 over that stretch is very impressive because those are very talented ball clubs. 2 of those games are on the road at Washington and at Utah. Kind of give me your thoughts on it.
Will, I think this is this will be sort of that defining stretch, like you said. I got them 1-2 in this stretch. I think Washington and Oregon is going to be tough. Those are seasoned teams, and although that they have questions, both of them do at times at the quarterback position and some key positions. Again, this is sort of similar ilk of LSU, where they're sort of hitting above their weight from a talent standpoint, and I think it's going to be tough there. I think the key game is going to be the Utah game because I think the ability for DTR in particular, and this team to sort of have the leadership and the moxie to say, hey, we play 2 really good teams, 2 teams that are not only thinking about Pac-12 contention but beyond. Let's get the train back on the tracks in Utah. Very tough place to play. Obviously, they're very physical. Kyle Whittingham has, an incredible system of excellence there, but I think they're going to bounce back and beat Utah in a tough kind of physical, high teens, low 20s kind of game, kind of a 24-20 type of game, and get the train back on the tracks there. So I have them going 1-2 in this stretch.
I think that's a fair assessment. Oregon may be the class of the Pac-12 this year, given the talent they have returning there. I mean, even the most optimistic Bruins fans, you're looking at one right here. It's going to be a tough game against Oregon, given the talent they have. Washington, Jimmy Lake has just done such a good job up there. Started with the secondary. You've seen how many guys he's trotted out to the NFL. Really had like kind of a under the profile year last year, given the COVID restrictions that we had. He went out and did a good job, and I think it's only going to build forward for Jimmy Lake. As the team wanted this guy to be their head coach when Peterson left, so they got a good thing going on there. Utah,
and people forget, Will, that really Washington was the class of the North, and it was sort of by default, because of COVID-related reasons, that even Oregon played SC and ultimately beat them in the Coliseum. And so I think you're spot on with that assessment.
A lot of talent returning there too. Jackson Kirkland, he would probably be the top contender to rival Sean Ryan, the left tackle for UCLA, for that left tackle spot on the first team All Pac-12. And Cade Otton is the other guy that's going to probably rival, Greg Dulcich for the best tight end in the pack. So they've got very similar, like-minded teams that are going to be playing each other. So that's another one where I'll just be camping out at home and watching that one, which will be a lot of fun. After that stretch, they go to Colorado, a game that was fun last year, high-scoring game between UCLA and the Buffalo. New quarterback for the Buffaloes this upcoming year, as theirs transferred to Oregon State. Kind of give me your thoughts on, UCLA playing the Buffalo at home this year.
Will, I think hopefully this is a bounce back game from last year. Obviously they opened with Colorado. Former UCLA coach Carl Durrell, back in the Pac-12 and building the Boulder program. UCLA had 2 turnovers in the first 3.5 minutes of that game, fell behind 14-0, and we're really behind 28-7 in the blink of an eye. It really, it looked like they just weren't quite ready to play. First game on the road, Pac-12, really a tough ask in sort of an asterisk type season. But then as you saw the game play out, you mentioned that that 63-yard run by DTR. He was peppering the ball all over the place. There was a really nice screen game going. Felton got going. DeLon Hurt made some plays. Keenan Allen made some plays. They really got into space, and you could see kind of the athletic difference that UCLA had relative to Boulder on the perimeter. And I think that difference is going to show again in this game. And as long as UCLA can protect the ball and not spot Boulder 3 touchdowns in the first quarter, I think this one should be a W.
I agree with that. Darrell has done a fantastic job with the program. Year 2 for him there. We wish him success, just not against the Bruins.
Right. No question.
Last 2 games, we got the big one of the year, UCLA-USC, a game that UCLA, by all accounts, should have won last year. And then they play an underrated team in the Cal Bears, who was a sleeper last year to win the Pac-12 North going into the season, but just they were kind of wrecked with a lot of COVID stuff and just didn't reach their ceiling. But Chase Garbers is the quarterback with the most starts returning to the Pac-12 next year. A lot of talent on that offense. They got a really solid defense. They always have under their current coaching regime. Give me your thoughts on those 2 games. And are those 2 winnable games? UCLA Bruins fans want to hear if they can beat SC.
Absolutely. And Will, it's been really close with SC. Last year, I think, totally outplayed SC, and it was more a case of UCLA losing the game than SC winning it, truthfully. I went back and saw the film of that game, and every game, every drive in the second half, outside of, the seam route that Dolcic had for 68 yards to the house, every drive in that second half either ended with a turnover, on downs, or ended because of a penalty. I mean, they had 3 false starts on 2 separate drives where, they basically extended the drive for SC to be able to kind of make that comeback. I mean, they really kind of gave that one away. Having said that, I think, they've been close with SC the last couple of years, but they've only beaten SC once in the Coliseum since 97. Coliseum's been kind of a house of horrors for UCLA in the last quarter century. This is going to be senior day for a lot of, the SC guys. I think SC's front 4 is just really powerful between, Freeman and Drake Jackson. And then you got kind of the monster and Drake London and kind of the receiver course, Keontae Ingram is quite the recruit that they've been able to flip from Texas. SC's got a ton of talent. With SC, it's always sort of a matter of discipline and coaching. But I think SC's going to be up for this game. As much as it pains me to say it, I think the SC game is going to be a loss this year. And then I think they're going to swing back in the finale with Cal. Garbers is a gamer. I remember, 2 years ago, they went into the Coliseum, beat SC, and the guy basically, sort of willed the team to victory. There were a couple of QB runs there to sort of seal that game in the fourth quarter. It was just all guts. With the incredible game last year on the road at the Farm against Stanford again, where his moxie really came through in the fourth quarter. He's a tough guy, but I think this is the game where there's going to be a big difference between finishing with 7 wins and finishing with 8 wins. 8 wins sort of gets you now into kind of more of the upper echelon Bulls in the Pac-12, depending how things kind of shake out. Is it a holiday? Could it be even potentially an Alamo? You're sort of thinking along those lines. And so I think with that much on the line, I think UCLA is going to end strong and finish with the win against Cal.
I love it. So I'm counting, 7, 8 wins for you. I think is that a fair assessment for the Bruins?
Yeah, Will, I think it's, I got them at 8-4. I think the way the schedule kind of breaks down for me is, you've got 6 winnable games against the bottom half of the Pac-12. And, this being year 4 a DTR, year 4 a chip, those are games you have to win if you're ready to make that statement. I think you got 4 games where, you're a decided underdog, Oregon, Washington, SC, LSU. And then you got the 2 games kind of in between. Those are your 2 questionable games, home against Arizona State, at Utah. And I have them winning both of those games to getting to 8-4. And I think that's where kind of Bruin Nation's a little split, where, folks that are more on the pessimistic side are kind of leaning more on the side of 6. Folks that really believe that they're going to, be more consistent or leaning more on the side of the 8. But I think it really swings on those two games. But I really like the matchups for UCLA, not only where the games are being played, but also the points in the schedule when those games are happening. And I like those to be 2 W's. And I think it's really fair for UCLA Bruin fans to have an 8-4 expectation. There's really no excuse for anything less than 8-4. I think is going to feel like a disappointment. And I think it's really going to have to make Martin Jarmond, UCLA athletic director, question whether or not Chip's the right guy moving forward.
Totally. I think 8 wins is right in the ballpark, but I'm going to raise you one. I'm going to give them 9 wins this year, and I think they beat SC. I do. SC, clearly the talent is all there. Drake London, by the way, so unfair how he was a D1 basketball player, just decided to pick up football and is now on the fast track to be a high NFL draft pick. I would kill to be a Division I athlete in one sport. This guy's doing it in 2 at a high level. It's unbelievable. But I think that's a game where we can just chew out the clock with our run game. I really do think that's an option. You mentioned Freeman, number 1 recruit in the country last year, going to be a stud by all accounts, but he is a true freshman. There's some adjusting there. Not saying he's not going to be a problem, but, I think by maybe sophomore, junior, we really started to see the peak of Freeman. I don't know. I just think we had the game in the bag last year, and granted it was at home, but I think if we run the ball effectively, that's going to be the hallmark of our team this year. I really think that could be a victory. And I think against SC, the offensive line lost. I mean, they are returning 4 or 5 starters, but they lost their most impressive player, which is Vera Tucker, to the pros. And Slovis gave me a little last year Sam Darnold vibes when he was at SC, where it's threw a little bit too many more picks than I would have liked to have seen. So I got that kind of vibe from Slovis. I'd like to see him rebound a little bit to his first year on campus starting. But 9-3, 8-4. Jamal, I think we did everything pretty much right. We got football on Saturday. Buddy, next time I'm in LA, we got to grab a beer.
Love it. Can't wait, Will. And excited for the game and hopefully excited to be back on and talk more Bruin football later this year.
That won't be